everybody, Annalisa here with ABC for Dance. This is lesson number 13 in your anatomy series, and we're going to talk about the square pelvis. So you may have heard teachers say in dance classes, you want to keep your pelvis square or keep your hips square, and it may not make sense what we really mean by that. If you can picture this being a box, the idea of keeping your pelvis square means whatever you do, that box moves, maintaining its shape and its relationship to each other without having some distortion going on. And it usually happens when we're talking about lifting our leg. So with Fred's help here, if I was going to lift my leg, or Fred's going to lift his leg to the side, Fred has really good range of motion, but Fred also doesn't have a lot of stuff getting in his way, and his hip socket's a little bit looser than ours usually is. So you'll notice there's no change in Fred's pelvis here. If Fred was going to continue to lift his leg, you would notice that he has to start tilting to allow that movement to happen. Now, with his external fixation, all these screws and everything holding him in place, it's easy for Fred to maintain that square pelvis when he lifts his leg. It's not as easy for us. We have to be really conscious of it. So what I'd like you to try, just do it along with me, hold on to something sturdy. You're going to point your foot to the side. Keep it parallel or neutral, so I'm not turned out, I'm not turned in. I just want to literally move my leg to the side. And just put your hand on your hip and see, am I sitting in my other hip? Am I shifting or lifting my hip? Where am I in space? And sometimes using our hand as a marker is a good thing, just because we'll feel the shift a little bit more. So you want to start lifting your leg up and then see, where do I have to start changing my body to allow the leg to continue to lift? And this is a really individual thing. It has to do with your joint, how loose your joint is, the shape of the bones, how deep the hip socket is, as well as muscle strength. So everybody's leg is going to be a little bit different before it starts causing you to have a reactionary move. And those reactionary moves are fine. In dance, we often think, oh, they want me to keep my hips square so it can't move at all. And that's not the case. There has to be some movement, but the question is the movement appropriate an amount for the amount of leg movement, number one? Are both sides moving evenly so my whole pelvis is going? So it's the difference between when I lift my leg to my side, am I just hiking up one hip, or am I taking myself into a tilt where I maintain that positioning? You can only lift your legs so high sometimes without that change. And the same thing happens when we turn out. So when we turn out, a lot of people think my legs need to be in a perfectly straight line. That's really not, it's not accurate for most of us. We're all going to be on a little bit more of a diagonal. So if you start in a first position turned out, and you have your hand holding onto something just for a little bit of balance, start to tendu that foot along your diagonal. Now think of lifting your leg, but imagine that diagonal projecting out. It's going to continue to project slightly forward if you're going on that diagonal. So allow your leg to lift in that line. What happens to your range of motion? Now try taking your leg to where you would like your side to be, or where you might think your side is. And you'll notice you have less height before you have to start compensating. If you have the ability to set your camera up, or like a phone or something to tape yourself, it'll give you a much more accurate read of whether you're seeing and feeling the same thing. If you don't have that ability, you can kind of use a wall to help you feel a little bit of the adjustments that you're making. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay sideways with my bum against the wall and my legs in a straight line. My upper body may or may not be against the wall, but what I want to do is I want to feel my pelvis stacked against the wall. This is going to be my reminder to stay square. So I have both parts of my bum flat against the wall, my legs parallel. I'm going to start lifting my leg. Right now it's neutral. As I continue to lift, I'm going to notice, oh, my hip has to lift, because I can feel it lifting and pushing down into the floor. So where can I lift my leg to, maintaining that neutral line in my pelvis? And then I'm going to turn both legs out and do the same thing. And feel, what does it feel like to try to isolate or dissociate my leg from my pelvis in this movement? And what's my range of motion? Then I'm going to start feeling what happens when I go further. I feel my waist pushing into the floor. I feel my hip hiking up. I might feel my rib cage rotating or shifting. So it gives you a little bit of feedback that way. To make that a better comparison to standing up, you want to maybe have somebody film you with your camera or set your camera up somewhere so that you can see it and do all of this straight on. Sometimes it's actually easier to see from the back. So if I'm standing with my back to the camera, sometimes it's much easier to see when I start lifting or shifting because I am not looking at my face or I'm not seeing other things that might distract me. It's a clearer line to see, oh, there goes my hip or there goes my rib. And one of the things you can do when you're watching is see, what's the first thing that starts shifting? As I lift, is it my ribs pushing sideways? Is it my hip hiking up? Am I actually moving my leg from the sideways position to a more turned out position? Like, where are my compensations? Once you figure out your compensations, you can start trying to figure out, what do I need to do to avoid them? And so that's why you really want to get an idea of, where's my body in space? Where are the pieces of my body stacked up in relationship to each other, and how do I maintain that relationship? That dynamic balance between our body parts when we're moving is what we really need in dance. And so that's why we want to think about, my pelvis is square, my leg can move independently without taking the rest of me with it. At some point, the rest of me has to go. Where do I let it go to make the most sense? Hope that helps you, and we'll see you for lesson 14.